Once upon a time, Elena and Marcus, two young hearts intertwined in a whirlwind of passion and promise, were inseparable, sharing their dreams and fears. Their love story was a vibrant tapestry of laughter, shared secrets, and countless conversations that stretched into the wee hours of the morning. They were a beacon of young love, their connection as palpable as a tangible spark, illuminating the darkest corners of their lives. In the bustling digital landscape of emojis and text messages, their love blossomed. A simple good morning text from Marcus was enough to put a spring in Elena's step, and their nightly video calls were the highlight of her day. They confided their hopes and dreams in each other, weaving a shared future that seemed as bright as a summer's day. But then, without warning, the music stopped. The once vibrant tapestry started to fray at the edges, the threads of their shared dreams unraveling one by one. Marcus, once so eager to share every moment with Elena, became distant. His messages, once filled with warmth and affection, became brief and impersonal, until they stopped entirely. Elena found herself staring at a screen filled with unanswered texts. Her heart ached with every passing hour, every passing day that Marcus remained silent. The once comforting ping of her phone became a reminder of his absence. Each unanswered message a blow to her heart. She found herself trapped in a deafening silence, a void that Marcus had once occupied. The dreams they had woven together seemed to fade into the ether, leaving her with a profound sense of loss. The silence wasn't just the absence of Marcus's voice, but the absence of their shared dreams, the absence of the promise of a future together. Days turned into weeks, and the silence grew louder, the unanswered texts piling up, leaving Eleanor in a state of torment. The world carried on around her, oblivious to her heartache, as she grappled with the sudden silence that had fallen upon her. Battling the torment of silence, Elena knew something had to change. The ghosting had gone on long enough. The unanswered texts, the unreturned calls, the silence where once there was companionship. It was a deafening void that Elena could no longer bear. She was adrift in a sea of uncertainty, the waves of unanswered questions crashing relentlessly against her. Eleanor was no longer just a victim of ghosting. She was a woman standing at the crossroads of her own emotional well-being. It was clear to her that she needed closure. She needed to understand why Marcus, a man she had shared laughter, dreams, and even the mundane moments of life with, had suddenly disappeared from her life. The decision to confront Marcus wasn't easy. Fear and apprehension gnawed at her. What if he rejected her again? What if he was cruel, dismissive, indifferent? These fears, however, were overshadowed by a fierce determination. She was tired of being left in the dark, tired of the unanswered questions that kept her up at night. It was then that Eleanor realized she was not alone in her struggle. Her friends who had watched her grapple with Marcus's disappearance were there for her. They listened to her fears, validated her feelings, and encouraged her to seek the answers she needed. They reminded her that she deserved respect, that she had the right to demand closure. Their support was the lifeline she needed. It gave her strength, it gave her courage. It was a powerful reminder that she was not just a victim of ghosting, but a woman capable of standing up for herself. And so, with a deep breath and a resolve forged in the fire of her own strength and the support of her friends, Eleanor made her decision. She would confront Marcus. She would demand answers. She would reclaim her peace. With the support of her friends, Elena gathered the courage to demand the closure she deserved. The day had come for Elena to face the ghost of her past, Marcus. As she walked into the cafe, her heart pounded like a drum, matching the rhythm of her anticipation. This was it, a moment culled from her countless sleepless nights, the moment of confrontation. She spotted Marcus at a corner table, his face etched with lines of exhaustion, a stark contrast to the vibrant man she once knew. The sight of him, weary and worn, stirred a cocktail of emotions within her. Anger, sadness, but also a tinge of compassion. Yet she steeled herself. She needed answers, deserved them, and today was the day she would get them. Approaching him, she felt the tension in the air grow thick, almost tangible. She took a deep breath, her nerves dancing on the edge of her resolve. "Why did you disappear?" she asked, her voice steady in the face of her swirling emotions. Marcus looked up, his eyes reflecting a similar turmoil. It was as if he'd been expecting this, dreading it perhaps, but knowing it was inevitable. He sighed, a long, deep sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. And then, he began to talk. He spoke of the pressures he'd been facing, those that had crept into his life uninvited, demanding his attention, his energy. He talked about his business going under, the dreams he'd built crumbling to dust. He shared his personal doubts, the ones that gnawed at his confidence, making him question his worth. These struggles had consumed him, he confessed, to the point where he felt he was drowning. In an attempt to stay afloat, he'd retreated from everything and everyone, including Elena. He hadn't meant to hurt her, he said, his voice barely a whisper, but in his fight for survival, he'd lost sight of the damage he was causing around him. Elena listened, her heart aching with every word. This was not the closure she'd expected, not the one she'd prepared for. Yet as she looked into Marcus's eyes, she saw a man grappling with his own demons. A man who was fighting battles she knew nothing about. She realized then that ghosting wasn't always about the one left behind. Sometimes it was about the one who disappeared, struggling to cope, struggling to breathe under the weight of their own problems. It was a painful realization, one that left a bitter taste in her mouth, but it was the truth. Marcus's explanation, though painful, opened Elena's eyes to the reality that sometimes people retreat due to their own struggles. It was a confrontation that had brought more than just answers. It had brought understanding, empathy, and a newfound perspective. And with that, Elena knew she was one step closer to healing, to moving on from the ghost of her past. As Marcus's words sunk in, Elena's understanding of the situation changed. It was like a veil had been lifted, revealing a truth she had been blind to. The silence that had once screamed of rejection was now the echo of a man wrestling with his own demons. It wasn't about Elena at all. It was about Marcus, his battles, his retreat from the world. Marcus's confession was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was also a salve for Elena's bruised heart. It wasn't about her shortcomings or something she had done wrong. It was about Marcus, his struggles, his need for space. It was about a man who was fighting to keep his head above water, even if it meant cutting off from the world, from her. In that moment, Elena found a strength she didn't know she possessed. She had confronted her ghoster, sought answers and found them, not in accusations or blame, but in understanding and empathy. She had gone from the victim of ghosting to a woman who understood that people have their own battles, their own reasons for retreating. Elena's heart still ached, but it was a different kind of pain, one not rooted in rejection, but in empathy for Marcus. She realized that sometimes people ghost not because they don't care, but because they care too much, feel too much, and find it hard to cope. It was a revelation that changed her perspective, not just on Marcus, but on ghosting as a whole. And so they parted ways, not with bitterness or resentment, but with a newfound respect for each other's struggles. Marcus for his courage in admitting his battles, and Elena for her bravery in seeking closure. They parted, not as lovers but as two individuals who had shared a moment of raw honesty and understanding. They parted ways, not as lovers, but with a newfound respect and the closure Elena had been seeking. With the weight of uncertainty lifted, Elena walked away from the cafe, her heart lighter. The confrontation, though emotionally charged, had given her a new perspective. No longer was she a victim of ghosting, but a survivor, a woman who had faced her fear and emerged stronger. A sense of relief washed over her. The silence had been filled with words, with truth, with closure. The ghost, Marcus, was not a monster hiding in the shadows, but a man battling his own demons. From this experience, Elena learned valuable lessons. She learned the importance of communication, of courage, and of closure. She learned to confront her fear, to seek answers, and to demand respect. Most importantly, she learned to value herself, to understand that her worth was not defined by someone else's actions or inactions. In the end, Elena learned that sometimes the hardest conversations are the most necessary for healing and moving forward.